Hello, and a very, very good morning to you all. My name is Gloria Macarenko, and I'm an IWF member since 2013. I'm a journalist at the Canadian Broadcasting Corporation in Vancouver. Yeah. Represent. I was so pleased to see Margaret Evans, my CBC London colleague, here moderating the panel earlier today. That was a real thrill for me. I've never met her in person. We've had many conversations over the television screen, but she's a brilliant journalist. And I seem to be popping my mic. My apologies for that. It's such a pleasure for me to be here today, and I just want to give a big shout out to the organizers and especially to IWF UK for an absolutely brilliant, dramatic welcome last night. Wow, the band was playing, the flags were being waved. It was just such a warm and brilliant start to what is sure to be a really engaging few days. So thank you very much for that. Also, a little bit of drama as well in the background. I got caught in a thunder, lightning, and hailstorm yesterday, which was dramatic. I saw on the BBC the King Charles dressed in all his regalia for the King's speech yesterday, so there was interesting timing and interesting fallout for that. And we have Keir Starmer under siege, so whether he'll be Prime Minister by the end of the conference remains to be seen, but we're keeping our eye on that as well. It is a real pleasure for me to be guiding this next conversation as well on justice systems and their impact on women, because around the world, justice systems were largely built by men. Surprise, surprise. And the results of that is that the framework that fails to consider what factors bring women into the system. Many are incarcerated for non-violent offenses, which are linked to poverty or coercion or protecting themselves and their families. Prison conditions in most countries remain designed around male populations, leaving women without adequate health care, without other services. And when women are released, the barriers to reintegration, the stigma, broken family bonds, lack of housing and employment, that can make rebuilding a life almost impossible. So this isn't a problem that's confined to any one region or any one political system. Recent statistics show that globally, the female prison population has increased by 57% since the year 2000, 57%, far outpacing that of male prisoners. So yes, it is a global problem. So this is a global conversation, and we have an extraordinary panel today to take us through that. Lady Unchained is a poet, an activist, a formerly incarcerated woman. She brings the perspective that no research or policy brief can replace. That's the lived experience of a system that too often crushes the very people that it claims to rehabilitate. Welcome, Lady Unchained.
Thank you.
Next to her is Tricia Everest. Tricia is the Secretary of Public Safety for the U.S. state of Oklahoma. Having served as Assistant Attorney General in her state, she left to found Remerge. So Remerge diverts mothers from prison and empowers these women to build healthy foundations for themselves and for their children. So she's a member of IWF Oklahoma. Welcome, Tricia. And Olivia Rope is a renowned human rights lawyer who is currently Executive Director of Penal Reform International, where she brings expertise in both international human rights law and criminal justice reform to her role. And prior to coming to PRI, she was at Amnesty International in Brussels. Olivia, welcome. What an esteemed panel. I'm looking forward to the conversation very much. And a reminder to all of you, if you have questions as we go along, please submit them to the app, and we will hope to get to as many of them as possible by the end of the session. Okay, let's kick in here with those statistics that I mentioned earlier. We talked about the rate of women being incarcerated, being up dramatically right across the globe. So Olivia, why don't you kick things off for us? What do you think is driving this?
Yeah, it's an honor to be here. Thank you. The honest answer is that it's not that women are committing more crimes. It's not that they are becoming more dangerous. I'm sure you would all agree. It's that systems are increasingly criminalizing the circumstances of women's lives. And if we unpack that a bit further, and there's some images up to kind of visualize this, we're talking about criminalization of survival. So our research that we documented in our report From Poverty to Punishment goes into really in-depth examples of this. So we see, even in the UK here, women are disproportionately imprisoned for things like petty theft, begging, street vending, informal economic activity. We know there's many, many women in the informal economy, far more than men. And the stories behind this is that women are often trying to survive. They have very few choices, if any, in front of them. And if we look at the drug policies, particularly in Latin America and Asia, where the rates of women going to prison are skyrocketing over the last couple of decades, women are going to prison for either using drugs, having very, very small quantities of drugs on them, or as couriers, small-scale sellers, and the complexities around why they were involved in the small-scale selling drugs, or it's often deemed as trafficking, but they are not in the high-level, chain of drug trafficking. So again, the choices for these women who end up in prisons, and I've seen many prisons across Thailand, for example, where there is just thousands and thousands of young women who should not be there. We also know that women are criminalized for who they are rather than what they've done. So morality laws, dress codes, laws on consensual relationships, seeking an abortion, that was also mentioned this morning, and colonial era laws. Typically, they were created by men, written by men, implemented by men, and the gender inequality that underpins women's criminalization is enormous. And if I can mention one more driver that we have documented, is the fact that the justice systems, or social systems even have repeatedly failed to recognize the violence that many women in prison, not all, but many, have experienced in their lives, and the trauma, and whether it's directly or indirectly related to the act or acts that ended up them being criminalized and imprisoned, are just not recognized. And Baroness Kennedy talked about that this morning in the law breakfast, if you were there. The most extreme examples is when women take it in their own hands and murder their abuser. But there's many non-such dramatic stories as well that we see, and it's very, I think it's very important to understand that these unmet needs around mental health, we also heard earlier, around violence, and the circumstances that these women are living in when they commit a crime is just not addressed by a male-dominated legal system when they go to court, or they might be even too afraid to explain it. So mitigating circumstances or even culpability is not gender sensitive, and that's an understatement.
Wow. No, and the good point. Yeah, that's a nice opening. Thank you. And I think, getting to the point that many of the women are victimized before they even get into the system, before they're even arrested, and then they just take it from there. And I was just thinking about how many people in this room, like, at what point does this ever cross your mind? Oh, women in prison. Like, the general convention is you commit a crime, you do
Not
the
one.
time. You know, there's that, well, of course they have to be punished for their crimes. So that sort of brings up the whole issue, you know, the difference between accountability and punishment here. And Tricia, I know that the state of Oklahoma used to have the highest rate of female incarceration in America. So how much of that do you think has to do with being unable to distinguish accountability and punishment?
Thank you, Brenda. First off, I must give credit to the late Lou Kerr from Oklahoma for introducing me to IWF. I want to thank Stephanie O'Keefe for this thoughtful invitation and for this incredible panel. And to the host committee, it's already been a remarkable and memorable experience, so thank you all. You know, the prisons and laws do not consider any of the root causes or anything that would lead up to it. And when you incarcerate someone, particularly a woman, you're only compounding those underlying conditions. So when you leave, the person is generally always worse, never better. So rehabilitation is not there. In Oklahoma, we looked at the pipeline of prison from age 5 through life and recognized that those underlying causes for the majority of people in our prisons is that we could have had a positive interruption from ages 5 to 18. So you could help the 5-year-old or lock them up later when they're 20 and say that you're tough on crime. Did I lose my mic? I did, for a second. You know, and our high rate of it was driven by many factors, including strict sentencing laws for nonviolent and drug offenses, as Olivia referenced. Punishment is the default. Many women are incarcerated for crimes tied to poverty, addiction, and coercion. Stigmas, like what you've heard about in the earlier panel and throughout today for mental health, addiction, substance abuse, really needed the cultural shift that's happening now because nothing was ever considering the root causes. So just to kind of add to what Olivia said, the typical person in Oklahoma's prisons, females, the 60–70%, they might have had a job. They're all mothers. They're taking care of their kids. They're trying to. They have an abusive partner, a coercive partner. He uses my car, my phone. He makes the drug deals. He keeps me addicted so that I'll keep him around. Because it's my phone, my house, my car, however it is, I'm the drug dealer. I'm locked up. My abusive, coercive boyfriend or partner has gone to the police and said, I'll give you Johnny. And they're like, oh, sweet. And that person will get no time or limited time. Meanwhile, I'm in jail awaiting Johnny to come save me. And he's already found another woman. And I'm locked away, and I'm the one that goes away. What happens to my kids when I'm locked away? And that's the general person.
Wow, okay. Lady Unchained, you were giving a little nod there of recognition, and it would be interesting, I think, for all of us to hear about your personal experience. You were imprisoned at the age of 20 for a relatively minor offense. What was that like?
What's interesting is that when you was talking about that particular situation, I was in prison for the first time, new to the prison system, and that saying, you do the crime, you do the time, I used to say that because, you know, why are you committing crimes? In my head, I'd never been in trouble. When I went to prison, I met women who were in jail because of a man. And you have this weird conversation where in that moment, it's like they still haven't acknowledged that. They haven't acknowledged that they are here because of a man. You know, and I would ask questions like, so you and your partner done this crime, and you got 8 years. How long did he get? And they're like, well, no, he's not in jail. No. But there was 2 of you in this crime. Why are you the only one who is here? You know, young girls, you know, being 20, I'm seeing girls as young as 16 in prison, and I'm thinking, how? How is this, you know, I guess when I went to jail, I thought it was probably going to be like a little boot camp, and there'd be like 6 of us somewhere just, chilling. Realized very quickly that there's a lot of us in here, and some of you should not be here. I'm meeting women who are in prison for animal rights protesting. I met my first vegan in jail. I was like, vegan, what's that? Before it was cool. And I've been in this situation, and I've opened my eyes and thought, I have to do something, because if I'm here and these women are here, and people have known for years that these women are coming here, why is nobody doing anything about it? So for me, it's kind of like going to jail was this opening me up to this big world, a community of women who I probably walk past every day, those women who are taking drugs on the street, and I'll be like, oh yeah, that's the drug user, and just stay away from it. But then when I was in prison, I was around all of these women, mothers, daughters, grandmothers, and I realized that we are all connected in ways that we don't know. It's literally one step, one mistake can get you into a world that was closed away, that society, the community, the media does not have eyes in. And I have this, I guess I'll call it a blessing now because of where I am today and what I do, but I got the opportunity to meet those women and understand that their needs, if they had been supported before, they would not be here. If they hadn't loved the wrong man, they would not be here. If they could provide food for their children and didn't have to steal with those petty crimes, they would not be here. But if I can see that as somebody while I'm an inmate, then why is it that we as a society globally have not recognized that there's needs that women need that need to be met?
An eye-opening experience for you and on so many levels, and it has guided you to this point.
Yeah.
And that you're here with us today to share
And I
that.
do actually have a poem called Trap Queen that talks about that. Just because there is a rap that talks about women cooking up stuff, and I kind of was dancing to it and realized, hold on, I think he's talking about the women I was in jail with. I need to change the lyrics and rewrite
Right, maybe
it,
we
so.
should hear a little bit of that later. Do you have it? Is it top of mind? Is it in your book?
It's definitely in my mind.
In your mind, okay. Well, we'll make time for that, for the wrap at the end.
Nice.
Well, here again, we're sort of underscoring an entire system designed by men, and again, kept away from the eyes of journalists and the world. We don't know what's going on behind those walls and behind those bars. So thank you very much for your perspective on that today. And with that in mind, Olivia, there was at the United Nations back in 2010, these were the Bangkok rules, and the Bangkok rules were the first international standards set to address the specific issue of women in the criminal justice system. 2010, Olivia, what's your assessment on how successful that has been? The Bangkok Rules 16 years on.
I think there has been a lot more awareness that has come out of the Bangkok Rules being adopted at the UN by 193 governments that have agreed these are the baseline standards for if a woman goes to prison. And even invites like this, I was thinking 10 years ago, this just would not be an agenda point in a forum like this. So bravo to the organizers really for addressing quite a difficult, complex topic with all of your amazing female leaders who will now be empowered to think more about this within your communities. So I think awareness and more kind of traction, and The Guardian ran a series on women in prison last year, for example. There is a little bit more known. Of course, we have Orange is the New Black. We have, some TV series, which maybe has helped with that, although very unrealistic, I would say. But I think the headline outcome of the Bangkok Rules was not only how to ensure that the rights and dignity of women in prison could be upheld within very difficult environments of a closed prison, but that they should not be sent to prison for non-violent petty offences, and that is a rule in the Bangkok Rules. And that is where we have seen the biggest failure because we just see the number of women globally in prison rising. And we also know that violence against women in prison is very, very common, whether it's abusive strip searches because of security, which are completely unnecessary, whether it's being torn away from your baby who might have been in prison with you from birth till usually about aged 3, which is, to me, the most pervasive act of violence that you could possibly commit on a woman. The reality 16 years on are a bit sad in that way. But I think, we do know more, there's more discussions, and one of the best things that's come out of the last few years, I think, is the centering of women with lived experience. And I personally refuse to speak on a panel unless there is a woman with lived experience, because who am I? I am just a legal expert. They have lived it. And I think, progress is very slow in penal reform, to say the least. I've been working in penal reform for many, many years, and it's very slow because there is so much stigma around people who go into the criminal justice system. But slowly, surely, I am positive.
Okay, on that note then, change is slow for penal reform. Women should not go to prison for nonviolent offenses. Tricia, your state made some great strides by passing the Survivors Act and reclassifying certain crimes as misdemeanors. So that has not been an easy process, right? How hard is it to look at alternatives to incarceration when there's this, tough on crime, this common stance, again, do the crime, do the time, that type of thing. How dependent is this progress toward reform? How dependent on the political situation of the day is it?
Thank you. The justice system acts in silos as a default system. It feeds on itself. And political will absolutely thrives on the maintenance of status quo and dysfunction. End stop. Now, 2010 and the Bangkok rules, we did start in Oklahoma being able to bring coalitions. So you would have prosecutors, mental health providers, district attorneys, and people like you all. And we would come to the table and started looking at building pilot programs. One woman is graduating from a pilot program, this is many years back, and she's standing at a podium, just like Lady Unchained. She looks like any one of us. She was sentenced to 20 years for drug offenses, minor crimes, with 4 children. She stands at the podium and she says, I'm a tax-paying citizen, I'm a trusted employee, I'm a daughter, I'm a mother. And the then director of corrections looks at me and he goes, just think. But for this program, that same woman, it would have been 18 years before she kissed her kids goodnight. It's absurd. Has anyone ever asked you all if you've ever been harmed? Has someone broken into one of your businesses or to your to stores, or in any way, shape, or affected you? Would you rather that individual that has harmed you, usually due, as we know, due to poverty, addiction, other root causes, would you rather them have wraparound services where they would be paying you back, maybe slowly, but trying to make you whole, or prefer to lock them up and ruin the next 3 generations of their family? No one's asked you all these questions. To combat political will, we must have you. We must have the business. We must have the disinterested person, the non-thoughtful party that comes and really points out the absurdities and what should be common sense. It's you that will make decision makers brave. Thank you.
Thank you.
So nice.
Now, Lady Unchained, what is it about your background that you wish came out in the courtroom and may have had some influence over your ultimate sentence?
Well, to be fair, one thing that I can't change about my background is that I'm a black woman, and I did not realize just how much that would have an effect on my sentencing. I learned later, so after I was released from prison, one of my amazing friends is an amazing lawyer, she's incredible, and I couldn't get her at the time. It was too late to switch lawyers. I was advised to plead guilty, which I always did anyway, but when I came out, this solicitor said to me, "Did you ever hear the term self-defense of another? That's when your family or a loved one is attacked in your presence and you react." And I was like, "I have no idea what that is." And she said, "So throughout your talks with solicitors, this is not something that was said." And she broke down. Obviously, at this time, I was out of prison, so I was just grateful to be out, not knowing what the life after prison entails, the journey that that takes to rebuild and to grow. I was just happy to be out. And she broke down and said, "You should have never gone to jail, because if those terms were used, you could have got anger management, you could have got community service. There's so many things that could have been offered in my case that were not, and because I had no idea of what the justice system was, and I did not have any experience of it, I didn't know how to navigate that journey. So by the time I thought, oh, I know a solicitor that might be able to help me, it was too late to switch over. So I think everything in my background that could have been used, the fact that I had gone to school, went to college, had these plans of going to university, never, ever being in trouble, like ever, ever. I think there was probably one time when I was a teenager and rode the bike before London had bike lanes, and the police was like, "Get onto the pavement." And I was like, "Oh my God, I'm so sorry." And now I've got my mother asking me why I begged her for a bike that I refused to ride because I don't want to tell her the police pulled me over. That's the most interaction with the police. So going from that to then going to prison and being sentenced to 2.5 years as a first-time offense, I couldn't believe it, but also I understand it now more than anything, because the justice system that we kind of put a lot of trust in and a lot of money into does not treat women of Black heritage, women with drug addictions, women who are coming from the care system, doesn't treat them fairly. And unfortunately, we do still live in a place where men do believe that we are made to be in the household. And, why didn't you think about your children? Why didn't you think about that before this? And nothing in between that is heard. And I think the saddest thing is that we've spoken about it, but it's the fact that so many women have been through domestic violence, so many women have witnessed their parents abused, and these are things that never come out until later on in life, that they sit down with maybe somebody like me who's like, let's do some creative writing and let's talk about what's actually happened to you, not why you're here. And then those doors are open and you see the tears, you see the realization that actually these are circumstances that could have been put forward in your case, but you wasn't strong enough or even made aware that you was allowed to discuss that.
Well, again, there was some prejudgment being a Black woman from South London.
Yeah.
What about once you were in the system? Was that a factor?
That was a massive factor. So I am from South London, but I was born in Uganda, Kampala. I came here at the age of 3 years old, so my whole life is here. One thing that we don't talk about enough is if a white woman goes to prison, she's then released back into her community. If a Black woman who is born in another country goes to prison, you are threatened with deportation. So for somebody like me who was raised in South London to then, get the knock on the door and be told you're going to a foreign national prison, and I'm like, well, I don't need to, I've got a British passport, I don't need to go there, and before this time I'd witnessed women being taken to that prison, women who were writing to me and saying, this place is insane. So for me to get that knock on the door and end up in a foreign national prison where, each prison you are assessed and, you get your name, your prison number, and they, your length of sentence, whatever, and you confirm everything. And in this prison, when I got my form, it had early removal. And I was like, what's early removal? And I was like, oh, well, that's to send you back to where you come from. And I'm like, South London? Is that where we're going together? You know, I can get a bus there, I don't need to fly over there, you know. And it was really incredible because for the first time I realized the racism within the system is so hidden, you know, but in this particular prison, there was no hiding it. They just were very much like, you're African, you go back to Africa. And I went to see immigration take a picture of you. And I was about to leave, and he was like, no, it takes like 10 seconds. Took a picture, scanned it through the system, and he went, perfect, British, off you go. But then within a couple of weeks, when I had asked to, I'd asked to be transferred because the prison was in Lincolnshire, which is miles away from London, South London, and my family were traveling for ages. I asked to go back to a prison which is more local, and I got this paperwork that said, this is the right prison for you, you are a foreign national prisoner, you meet the standards of a foreign national inmate, so no, we cannot transfer you, and if you do want anything to be released earlier, we can fast track your deportation. And so I had a deportation date. You know, I started to go very much crazy because at this point, every part of my identity that I thought I had was being stripped away. And not to mention that you're already stripped when you go to jail. So this is, the physical strips happen, and now it's just more stripping of who you are. And to be honest, I had to go on hunger strike, and it was the only way I could see myself fighting without raising my voice as a black woman and being labeled loud, aggressive, and angry. If I didn't eat, it meant that I had no energy to react to that, you know, racism. And it took a long time, but eventually, you know, my mum refused to send the passport in because she said, this prison is, something's wrong here. And she came in to a visit, showed the passport, immigration came to the visit, interviewed me, and basically after the interview said, I don't have any idea why I've been forced to interview you. I already told them you're British. But because the officers can be racist, he was pushing for that to go the way that it went. And so he signed me off and said, look, you're British, you've proven it already. I don't know why they've asked you to bring your passport in. Go and put in the request. And I put the request in, and you know, I remember when I finally proved I was British, the officer who was in charge actually walked past me and said, oh, I heard that you brought your passport, lucky for you. And every bit of my body wanted to scream and shout at him, but I knew that by shouting at him, I could be in more trouble. So I just lowered my head and continued walking until I got that knock on the door to be transferred back to a prison closer to home. And funny enough, I was British again. I had my British paperwork.
Olivia, back to your point about the importance of having someone with lived experience on the panel. My goodness, thank you for sharing that. The clock is ticking down. Thank you to those of you who have sent in some questions. We'll get to those now. The first one is from Joanne Salazar. How do we redesign criminal justice systems so that trauma-informed compassion is treated not as optional empathy, but as a core requirement of justice for women? Perhaps who would like to take that on?
That's a very good question, and I think trauma-informed practice is becoming more understood, but not yet completely implemented. And as you were speaking, and we were talking backstage also, I was thinking about, you know, what works. There's all this evidence out there. There is more and more research by criminologists, across the board, across all disciplinaries around what works to support women who were neglected or left behind and have come into the justice system. And in England here, there's a lot of noise at the moment around how to address women's imprisonment. mainly because of crazy high rates of self-harm and suicide in women's prisons, which has received a lot of headlines. And women's centres, which exist, and they're really a positive example that we talk about a lot, have shown that they work. And these are centres in the community, so they might be part of a post-release condition, or they might be part of probation or a condition you get from the judge, and they combine housing support, mental health care, substance misuse treatment, employment support, family counselling, all under one roof. And these address the causes that we're talking about. And what do they cost? Between $1,200 and $4,000 a year. And a prison place costs minimum of £52,000 a year, and that's just for the detention, not the impacts on the children and the whole family. So if we're looking at what is trauma-informed practice and what works, we have the evidence, but there is just a big problem, and we were bitching about it back. You know, why can we not just see the decision makers implement what works? And it's just so frustrating.
I'm sure. Let's get in another audience question. I don't know, Tricia, you tell me if you are able to take this one on, or perhaps we can go back to Olivia.
You might know better.
What countries are leaders in holding men accountable for violence against women, and what are the key strategies that they have implemented that work? That is from Eileen Wash from IWF New York. Tricia, do you?
That one I don't.
Okay.
I don't know.
Olivia, do you have an idea? Leaders in this field?
That is a tricky one. I mean, I guess if I can slightly twist it to what I do know, I think going back to understanding the connections between violence against women and criminalization is very important. And I mean, I think if you look at the rates of prosecutions for domestic violence, they're incredibly low. But if you look at the rates of violence, women who have experienced violence and are criminalized for offences relating to that, it's very high. And so I think, you know, drawing again on what Baroness Kennedy said this morning, if we're thinking about equality, it's not about sameness. People come into the courtroom, like Lady Unchained explained, on different levels, let's say. And so you cannot treat people the same. And I think if you look at violence as a crime, and you unpack that for men and women and different identities, intersectional identities within that, that tells you a lot about the legal systems globally. So I don't have a good practice, sorry.
Okay. I want to get in one more question, and perhaps, Tricia, you can answer this one. This is from Rebecca Chavez-Hauk from IWF Utah. Has the increase of communities contracting with for-profit correctional facilities, has it perversely incentivized punishment over rehabilitation?
So what it does when you have a for-profit correctional facility, and in Oklahoma, I want you to know that we have now closed 4 prisons in the last 5 years. We have bought out every prison that was a private prison and maintained them ourselves. And what you see in the private prisons, or in a lot of states or in a lot of countries, is that generally we all inherited a warehousing system, that it was just bringing in money, and that any type of programming is essentially only babysitting for idle hands. And what we all can shift to, and how we also can be more trauma-informed, is again, you all. You all speak up, find a pilot, find a story, start telling about it. And when people who don't seem to be involved are talking about the absurdity, it starts winning, and you could point to it. So going from warehousing to making people workforce ready is quite a transition. So you all really are the key to making that difference.
Okay, and a final question from me for all of you. And Tricia, maybe you could pick up on that point, because I think you're probably going to underscore what you just told us, which is, what can members who are here today, who are saying, what can I do wherever I live in the world, as leaders in their communities to improve the prospects of women in the criminal justice system? Tricia.
So when you talked about the mental health panel just before us, many people in mental health in Oklahoma were only talking to mental health specialists, like it was in the silo to a silo. And so invite people to be able to have panels like this. Invite someone that was previously incarcerated. Invite them into the world and into unlikely outside of justice system communications, and we really together can move mountains around the world.
No, I'm saving this one.
Okay. Yeah, I think building on that, I think business leaders have such an important role in employing people who have been in prison. Do not be afraid. There's so many examples out
That's
there.
the best.
And if I can point you to one, whether you like him or not, Richard Branson from Virgin has a whole toolkit for business leaders on how to approach employing people who have been in prison.
Nice. And Lady Unchained.
Yeah, I definitely would say just don't believe everything that you hear about women in prison. I've set up a whole CIC. I mentor artists. I work in prison. I go in and do creative writing workshops. And that's because people have decided that they want to help me do that. They want to help fund me. They want to help support the work that I'm doing. Without that support, without those people, I probably wouldn't be able to do what I'm doing. I mean, I probably would do it by force regardless. But it's easier to do it when you have people who are actually saying, do you know what, I know somebody, that Lady Unchained, because that means that the next recruiter is going to say, you know, actually, if she can do it, why am I not giving that person the opportunity? And I think that's what is needed. I always say the mic is not for me, it's for the person coming after me. And those people are coming after me, and they need to have spaces like this to be heard, to be seen for what they're doing today and how they're living today, not just their past. And yeah, I think if you give people the opportunity to step into those doors, they will prove to you that they can do way more than you expected them to do, if not even thousands more.
Beautiful, beautiful. Two things. Yeah. Can you hold up your book while you have it here? Behind Bars by Lady Unchained. She's brought her book here. And one more favor, because you just mentioned it in one of your introductory remarks about being behind bars, and you wrote a rap. Can you share your rap? Can we go out on a rap?
I feel like I might just perform that Trap Queen one just because we spoke about it. So, it's not in the book. It didn't make it in the book. There wasn't enough space. Okay, so hopefully I remember all of this. He said he's in love with that Coco, so your relationship had to be on the low-low. But when it came to doing time for that Coco, so your relationship became public real quick, because he needed you to take the rap. The funny thing is, he probably would have got less than you if he could just own up to his crimes, but you was too keen to please a man who would never please you back. So after you got the 5, he promised you he'll be there till the end, and those first 3 months just flew by, because see, he looked like he put in all the work that made sure you was nice and sweet in your new crib. The problem is, now he's got a new Lola on the out, and to her, you just look like the ex who didn't have a clue. But she'll soon get the cue to put in the extra work just like you, so she can be main chick to what used to be your main squeeze. Now you're living with this pain that's got you wanting to split your wrists, got you thinking about the life you had before you went in, the men who treated you right, but you just wanted to be part of that clique. But where was that clique when the judge clicked away your life, and where was that clique when your mum was shedding tears for your lies? See, it hurts me to write these words because it makes us women look like fools. Can the D really be that good? To have you doing time fantasizing about how good it was, while your man's on the out reliving your fantasies of his new boo? See, too many girls want to be road girls, but they don't know what it means to be behind those bars, losing your identity to those walls, only reminded of your name when you receive post, told when to eat, sleep, and better be ready for that roll check. See, you don't want to be caught with one leg up and arse out, only to find around and find Officer Smithy at your window, because see, he got front row tickets to your one-woman show. So carry on putting money and man before your life, and see if they ever put you before their time. Just remember that life teaches you how to live it if you only live long enough to learn. And that's if you don't get caught up in a fate war, only fueled by your greed, because the only thing you'll be learning is how to rest in peace. Or better yet, just get used to those bars. And I ain't talking about the kind of bars that I just told. Thank you.
Thank you.
So then,
Well done. Oh my goodness. That was completely spontaneous, I have you know. We hadn't talked about it. It was the first I'd heard about it when she mentioned the rap. So, oh my goodness. Lady Unchained, Tricia, Olivia, thank you all so much for being here today.
Thank you.
Given us a lot to think about, of course. Wow. Take those conversations back to the members in your communities as well. What an incredible morning. Okay, we're going to break for lunch. It will be served in the Richmond Ballroom on level 1. The behind-the-scenes tours are launching from there beginning at 1:45. Thank you all very much.